Here we go.
All right. Hello, Balach. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. A bit early in the morning, 9 a.m. in Berlin.
Yeah. What do you have for breakfast today in Berlin?
I have no idea. I'm gonna see after this recording.
All right. Uh, I asked because when we were discussing what topic to cover for today, you suggested, how about we talk about um, shit, what was the term? Food, food production, food sustainability. Uh, what was it? Food production, technology and food production, right? Sorry. Yeah.
Hmm.
So food production is a interesting thing because uh, where I live in Singapore, and once upon a time your home as well, food production is a big deal right now because Singapore barely produces any food at all. Less than 1% of the land on the island is used for agriculture. And it's actually gone down. Decades ago, it was at least, I think was something like contributed 4% of Singapore's GDP, and now it's probably less than a percent. So
Wow.
it is a big change from what it was before. And this is a huge thing, especially coming on the backs of the pandemic, because as you know, there was some problems with supply chains, and Singapore relies almost entirely on food imports. So supply chain problems leading to higher cost of food, as well as a breakage, in some supply chains. There was a time when like somebody, there was this viral photo of a pair of chickens that
Mm-hmm.
cost 72 Singapore dollars. The sticker, the label,
Wow.
$72 for two chickens. That would be what would that be in euros? It would be like something like 50 euros.
Yeah.
50 euros for a pair of chickens. And it went viral. It was hilarious. I think everybody had a good time with it. People love to complain. And then it died down. So what happened was that exports of chicken from Malaysia was banning exports of chicken. And
Hmm.
Singapore is a huge importer of chickens from Malaysia. So this shot up the price. And on top of that, these were organic chickens, which in the first place are not that common in Singapore. And in the second place, when there's a shortage of the non-organic chickens, well, organic chickens will shoot up in price. So that's exactly what happened, and that was pretty hilarious for a very short time. I avoided eating chicken for that time. Yes.
Wow. That's a very interesting example, and great that you already bring in the economy around food and food supply chain into the picture. So where do we go from there? What happened then?
Well, very quickly, Singapore started importing chickens from Indonesia, a couple of other places. So that crisis was averted. People could still eat chickens, just that they were frozen. They weren't, as fresh as people wanted it to be. But it turned out to be fine. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's I'm just gonna point out the labeling around all these topics, right? So in that innocuous sentence, glad that Singapore figured out the chicken solution or the chicken problem. But this part about also transportation and the supply chain when it comes to food, how that impacts demand and supply, pricing, and people's consumption behaviors. That is also a very interesting angle.
yes, actually, um, allow me to share my screen for a bit. Uh, a, a trained economist would say each country ought to put their energies to focus on what they have a relative advantage in. So Singapore having a relative advantage, due to its geography, on importing shipping lanes should focus on shipping, logistics. focus on finance, that sort of thing, because that's what she has a natural advantage in. Nobody else can replace that. And as a as somebody who studied economics in university, I was trained to think exactly that way until you run into a situation where, oh shit, we have no food. So this is a big issue, and I want to just show you like how widely this has been picked up. Here we are, BBC News. How Singapore is turning multi-story car parks into farms. Check that out. Eileen Goh runs a farm from the top deck of a car park in Singapore. You'll just skim. I just want you to have a look at what it looks like. Look at that. These farms are located in public housing estates on the roofs, which otherwise, they would just be a car park. Uh, and you can see there's a car park ramp down over here. So fewer parking spots for cars, but more food, more food security. And this is also covered in the MIT Technology Review, vertical farming. Check that out. This is in the first year of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And they have these, this is a different kind of setup where it's grown indoors with LED lights on 24 hours a day, humidity controlled, temperature controlled, with hydroponics, so that the plant is growing consistently 24/7. Check that out. Looks really high tech.
It's very fancy.
Very fancy indeed. And it goes far. And I don't know, do you read quartz.com? I think quartz.com is also considered a very respectable uh, news outlet. And they covered pretty much the same story: parking lot roof turned into urban farm. You can see,
Mm-hmm.
actually, it's the same one, the same company, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And they have this. You can see that this here is the hydroponic tray. Now it's
Mm-hmm.
actually inclined. It's a bit hard to tell, but it's actually this is the top, and I think water will run down from the top row by row, crisscrossing until it reaches the bottom. I think there's something like 4 or 5 rows on each rack like this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there you go. You can see them crisscrossing, and gravity will take the water down. Okay, let's see. There you go. There's some graphics. I don't want to spend too much time, but I just want you to know that, show that they're covered everywhere. There's more than one on Quartz. There's a indoor urban farm startup that's undercutting importers by 30%. Wow, that sounds incredible, right? How
Mm.
is that for real? Cheaper than, what you get in the stores by 30%? That's insane. So that's one called Sustainer. Yeah, this handsome man, CEO of Sustainer or Sustainer. I don't know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so forgive me, Benjamin, for butchering your company's name. And so much so that even the World Economic Forum has, you know, taken up this interesting topic, talking about, the World Economic Forum loves sustainability topics, stakeholder capitalism. I think for those of the audience who don't like the World Economic Forum, there's nothing in here that will change your mind. But you will at least see something that is not related to the public figures, and that's good. Let's take our focus off of that for a while and just see some of the issues that are being discussed. Here's something a little bit interesting to look at. So it turns out that the majority of the licensed farms in Singapore are not actually growing vegetables at all. They're growing fish.
Mm-hmm.
So then in Singapore, the traditional way to rear fish is in something called a kelong, which um, I'm not sure our audience knows. So I'm just going to show it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a kelong is something like this, right? So it'll
Is
be
that a?
a
Mm-hmm.
fish farm. Yeah,
So it's a structure built along the seashore,
yes. And there
which
will
is pretty
be.
cool. I mean, it's
Oh, I'm
nicer
glad. I'm
than,
glad you think.
having a backyard pool in which you're growing salmon or something.
Well, I don't think it's cold enough for salmon, but certainly some other kinds of fish. Yeah. These are very common in Singapore and Malaysia. I think they're rather unique. I haven't heard of them in Thailand or Indonesia, so it might be a bit more unique to um, what we call the Malay archipelago. Yeah. Okay, back to so here you go. Fish, huge amount of fish grown, lots of leafy vegetables, land-based fisheries. I think they do a lot of prawns there, and then the rest are really quite marginal, so we don't really bother. Okay, that's World Economic Forum, and also yeah, Singapore's interest extends to lab-grown shrimp. It's reported by Reuters in May 30th of I think should be this no last year. I don't know. Sorry, can't help with that. So it says here May 30th, but I don't know if that's last year or the year before. Uh, However, it's interesting to. I just want you to just everyone to take note that lab grown food, like and plant-based meat substitutes have their place in Singapore. Apparently, several have set up shop or set up their corporate HQ in Singapore. I think the Singapore authorities see it as a very promising for a couple of reasons. And I'm just interpreting here, so it's not from them directly. First of all, it's high tech. Second of all, it improves food security. Uh, so these factors combined, it's good for branding and it's also good for actual food security. It is exactly a kind of thing that Singapore likes to support. That's why there's more interest in it. Although I think uh, a, an impartial observer would say that there's a long way to go before lab grown meat or plant based meat substitutes become mainstream. Everybody, there's no question about that. So that's why I wanted to show so far. If I Yeah, what do you think so far?
It's very interesting. I'm just trying to synthesize and try to make sense of the overall landscape, right? So I'm glad we started with food production and urban and vertical farming and its connection to food security that COVID-19 sort of brought to the forefront. We had all sorts of things, right? In Europe and in a lot of places, people were hoarding toilet paper, and then there was a shortage of toilet paper.
Yeah,
And in other places, if you're relying on importing chicken from the neighboring country, and that supply line gets stopped for whatever reason, then you suddenly have a shortage, and you have to secure that supply. And and so the question naturally becomes, is it a better strategy to rely on each other to kind of complement or supplement each other's needs from a country or regional point of view, or everybody grows their own food? And I think everybody grows their own food is never going to happen because now, thankfully, we have seen the advantages of being able to import all sorts of varieties from all sorts of places that has really enriched our cuisines, our eating habits, and the economics have worked well enough that in normal times, it all seems to work out very well. And so this kind of taking that forward step of, right, then what is really the place of urban farming and vertical farming in this whole picture? Because we're not always going to be in a state of emergency. If Malaysia stops exporting chicken, there's always Indonesia, there's also some other places. um, it might get a bit more expensive, but you don't necessarily have to rely on just one partner potentially hiking up the prices. And we saw this with Germany and Russia. Germany is almost dependent, or was almost dependent on Russia for almost half of its energy needs. And when those supply lines get hit, you have to think about diversifying and potentially finding other suppliers or producing your own energy locally. And so, one of the things I was wondering going into this talk was the high tech urban and vertical farming. What place does it really have? Is it just a fancy new thing that we are trying out? And I don't know, and I would love for you to kind of bring that part together. What do you think about that? Because I get the feeling that the high tech farming is only interesting to the extent that really, if it really is innovative, in the sense that maybe it speeds up plant growth cycles, or the vertical farming is interesting in the sense that you can stack up multiple fields in a way, and for countries like Singapore, that is important. In a regular farm, you might have 1 acre being harvested or sown, but in a vertical farm, you basically can have as many layers that you can have, so you can multiply production. But is that enough? And I can tell you from urban farming, Berlin has a very vibrant culture from that point of view. A lot of places in Germany do, but you have neighborhood areas where people go and they grow different things, tomatoes, cucumbers, chilies, things that can be easily grown. But it's barely enough for these people to eat. Like that doesn't necessarily that doesn't even, you don't want to talk about food security related to that. It provides a nice social occasion for people, and it provides a bit of exercise for them. So I'm kind of coming to this understanding that urban farming is good for neighborhood and people, but don't like it's got nothing to do with food security. But vertical farming might be interesting, and the whole high tech version of things is still like more of a toy that we are playing with than something that can be relied upon. What's your feeling on this?
Oddly enough, I think I take the it surprises me as well that I think I take the opposite view that if the opportunity exists, for a lot of people in Berlin to grow their own food, I think that's actually very robust and very uh, adds a lot to food security because it's not just the produce itself that is important. I mean, that is valuable. It is the skill. It is the skill for to care for the plants. Uh, the networks that it creates locally, right? People may know that where to go or where is the local farmers market, and I think that these are valuable too. Uh, if it's more it creates a more robust society compared to one that relies almost exclusively on markets like supermarkets, grocery stores. So unfortunately, that is what we have in Singapore. That Reuters article I showed reports that only 1% of Singapore's land is devoted to agriculture, and with production costs higher than the rest of Southeast Asia, uh, it is a real challenge for things to turn around, right? They lack land, and thus what you mentioned just now, you said they maybe they grow it vertically. Yes, that's exactly what they're trying to do, and we saw the photographs there, um, and obviously I think if probably some of our audience are thinking the same thing. I guess if we know that vertical farming is possible, we know that land is scarce, so we can grow it vertically. And I guess the next question is, oh, so what? How do the costs stack up? No pun intended. So, uh, there's one company that says we can do it 30% cheaper than importers, and I actually went to look it up. If you'll just let me share my screen again very quickly. Okay, so this is that company, Sustainer. I still can't figure it out. There, here it is being sold. They sell the salad mix for a little under $4, 4 Singapore dollars. Kale blend for $4. This is all discounted, by the way, 20% off. Green salad about $4, and then just kale itself is $6.40. Let's see, arugula is 480. Okay, and then if you look on Amazon, which does uh, fresh vegetables, Arugula's 525. That was 480. So yeah, competitive, very competitive. Granted, that's discounted, and this one is not. This one, the first gourmet salad result is 630. I think that's much more expensive than what you see here. Even the kale blend is cheaper. So very competitive there. Uh, Now, if you just get lettuce, then it's $4, which is about the same as what you get here. But with kale, which is considered more, kale is substantially more expensive. That's probably a pretty good deal. So it looks like they do a pretty good job actually. Let's see what else. Can I just
Are these
search?
guys based only in Singapore?
Yes, I believe so. You can uh check out their. Wait, hold on. 404 mesclun salad, outrageous salad, $4 or 650. So yeah, it's kind of competitive.
But it's
Here they
amazing,
are. The
right? And
website is. Oh, it's pretty. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Pretty good. Systemir. I think this is it. Yeah. So here they are, indoor vertical farm. That's what it looks like on their website. Looks quite good, right? They are not a
yeah,
sponsor for our audience. They're not a sponsor. We're just showing it for everyone's interest. So it looks like a really high tech, very modern, high quality facility, and you expect that to be quite expensive. But turns out that no, the pricing looks quite competitive. Here you go, kale, spinach, lettuce, right? They do some. I saw. I think they do some noodles as well. Some spinach noodles. Yeah, there you go. Spinach noodles. You can have a blend. So they're trying to sell a bunch of different things, make a little more money, and which is great because they're doing this all indoors. There you go. Oh, look at that. I think the color choice is rather unfortunate. It looks disgusting, but uh, I know that it probably tastes quite normal because the green is just from having the blending in the leaves when you make it. Just that it doesn't really affect the taste, but just the color is not very nice. Yeah. So
this is quite amazing, right? So even though it is essentially all leafy greens,
yeah.
which probably points to the fact that in hydroponic systems, there's certain limit to what kind of things you can grow. I definitely don't expect wheat to be growing there anytime soon, but who knows? But that's already incredibly encouraging. I did not expect that, and also the second stage, right? Not just the leafy greens themselves, but products based on them. That already kind of satisfies me, somebody who loves food and doesn't want to be one-sided in their food selection. This is very encouraging that yes, I could get spinach tofu and spinach noodles and kale dumplings.
Yes. So this is all from Singapore's. I mean, a large part of it, the growth is from Singapore's initiative, to do something called 30 by 30 to produce 30% of its own food needs by the year 2030. There you go. Uh, so I think this is a very noble goal. This is very un un Singapore. Like I don't think this is immediately obvious, but it is very un Singapore. Now, what is Singapore's brand is business friendly, very optimized economically. Try to do the things that we're good at, avoid the things that we're weak at, and thus uh, gain a competitive advantage. That's always been Singapore's idea, right? We want to position, in a way that maximizes our strengths, minimizes our weaknesses. But this is clearly going all, totally the other way. We're going right into an area of utmost weakness and eschewing our strengths because the alternative is too risky. So uh, circumstances force this in Singapore's way. That is, food security is a big deal. It's a major worry. If there is a crisis and you can't get enough food, man, that is really the end of it. So you have to work on this. However, you were right. When you mentioned wheat earlier, things like wheat or rice, cassava, potatoes, these I think are really important. If you really want to produce 30% of your nutritional needs, what does that mean, right? Are we talking about calories? Are we talking about it in holistically, like 30%? We need to produce 30% of the vitamin C, A, B, C, D, up to K that the population consumes every year, 30% of it? Or do we just need to, do calories, and that will be how we measure success, because maybe calories is the most difficult thing. You need energy. So how exactly do you go about it? Now, I don't think that it's that. I don't know the definition, and I think it's okay. We can still have a discussion without it. But without things like some staple foods like potatoes or rice, um, and huge amounts of protein, without those, then I don't think it would be a popular opinion, but I would say that it's purely cosmetic. Like, you can't produce
But
enough kale or lettuce to survive a long crisis.
I do agree, but I do want to also acknowledge and admire a bit kind of the this ambitious goal, 30% by 30, 2030. Symbolic as it may sound, 30 by 30 slides off the tongue pretty easily. And even if it is essentially, let's suppose that in the end it's just the leafy greens, all the different types that Singapore would otherwise be exporting get produced within Singapore thanks to this program, and that kind of comes close to 30% of the overall needs.
Yep.
It's kind of a specialization, sub-specialization within the food production, but it still, I think, is going to foster a lot of innovation, because I honestly did not expect that that vertical farming as of now could be competitive even to Amazon prices, right? Like that's almost the gold standard. Amazon can really take advantage of its logistics engine and be incredibly price competitive. And for a smaller scale operation to be able to do that, that's already encouraging. And this is just the beginning. These kind of things are probably going to bring a lot more innovation into the system. And who knows, maybe we'll never be able to grow potatoes in kind of vertically stacked farms, or we might come up with a way of providing enough soil, and that might open up possibilities. So I do now have a different perspective on the potential of vertical farming, even if it might be limited to a few species of plants that we grow.
I take your viewpoint. Um, I I don't really hear an argument to say that how this can really contribute to food security just now. Lettuce is a really low value crop and also low in nutritional content. And kale is it has a reputation as a superfood. You saw on the website, right? I showed you. They do baby spinach, kale, lettuce, um, and these are not nutritionally dense. So that's the problem that these initiatives have. If you want to grow plants like what you saw, with in the photo, those hydroponic setups, there's a real limit to what you can grow. Some are just not conducive to it. So if you wanted to, do something with high protein content, you have to do a lot of beans, and for whatever reason, they don't do that. So it's high chance that it's not suitable. And then the other thing would be, so let's say maybe, okay, we still want more calories, so we try to do fruits. Well, then you need trees, and trees do not cope well in these You can't do it inside these specialized rooms. Maybe you can do it in greenhouse. Like plenty of tomatoes are grown in traditional greenhouses, not in these high tech greenhouses, just a regular old greenhouse. So it's just provides a warmer environment control, and you don't have incessant rain, because in Singapore and Malaysia you can have this. In the rainy season the rain is incessant, and maybe that's just really bad for the tomato. So you can actually use greenhouse, and that'll be traditional, but it wouldn't be stacked,
Hmm.
right? And so you'd be subject to the same land constraints that you typically encounter. The thing that, and I don't know if you noticed this, of all the articles that I skimmed through, only one showed a chart. Didn't even devote much uh many much text, any text, I think, to talk about the fish farms. The fish farms, I think, are really, the way forward, because you're limited, land space is limited, but uh, the the seas around Singapore, every country has its own, exclusive economic zone, some number of, I think, 7 miles from their coast. So you can do a lot of stuff there, but no column inches were devoted to that at all. Not sexy enough. How
Hmm.
unfortunate. Because you could do fish, and that could provide a buttload of protein, calories. You could turn it into fish balls. It's great. I think it would be fantastic. But they wrote absolutely nothing about it, because
Do we know how much fish does Singapore import? Because in one of the charts you did show that majority of the farms are coastal fish farms.
yeah.
They may not be enough, but that would be a good number to check, right? How much does fish does Singapore produce versus import?
Let's see if Google has an answer. 134,000 tons, worth 760 million Singapore dollars, which is about 500 million euros in 2020. So probably about the same. Most of
And
it from Malaysia and Indonesia.
can do
Yeah.
you see anywhere how much percentage of its needs that was? Um,
Uh, Percentage of the needs.
yeah,
I don't know. I wonder. Uh, Let me check how much fish did Singapore produce. Statista.com reports that in 2020, the population of Singapore consumed 90,000 tons of fish. Consume, but that doesn't make any sense, because I just mentioned that 134,000 tons of fish was imported from Malaysia and Indonesia. So the importation would be higher than the production. So that doesn't make much sense. Something, I don't know, doesn't something doesn't add up. Statista also says that in 2021, the fish produced in Singapore totaled 4.2 thousand tons. Now, irrespective of which figure is correct, in the import numbers or the consumption numbers, at least they're on that order of magnitude, which is around 100,000 tons of fish. Consumption and import, it's around that number, whereas the production, according to Statista, was 4.2 thousand tons. So it's like, I don't know, it's like a 50 times off, 25 to 50 times off what is required.
I think I found a Channel News Asia article from a few years ago that says around 9 or 10% of fish consumed in Singapore is produced locally. So about 90% of it similar to other foods is imported. So yeah,
Uh,
I'm sure there's potential to be exploited there.
yeah, yeah, certainly. Um, I found, yeah, I also saw an article on Channel News Asia. But if you don't mind, I like to move into a
Hmm.
slightly different direction, but
Let's
still,
do that.
circling this, just less on Singapore, uh, because I want to show you. There's this writer from deputy editor at Fast Company. He
Hmm.
just tweeted a couple of days ago about vertical farming. So he wrote that growing lettuce with LED lights and automated systems got nearly $2 billion from investors, including from me at Fast Company. But the bottom seems to be falling out of the industry. Let me walk you through our new story. So there are some companies, Fifth Season, a company called Fifth Season, closed entirely. Uh, Aero Farms pulled out of a SPAC. SPAC is the acronym for what? Special Purpose Acquisition Company. That's a way, like a backdoor way to get to become listed on something like the Nasdaq or something. Agricool, another company, went into receivership, which is essentially bankruptcy. Infarm and Iron Ox both laid off half their staff. Presumably, these are North American companies. So vertical farming's, really suffering. This is after investors pumped nearly $2 billion into the industry, hoping for a level of returns that are basically impossible with cheap commodities like lettuce. What did they think they were going to get? And so this is pretty funny. How did investors think that they could find Silicon Valley style returns in lettuce? Some of the issues, the startup costs are incredibly high. Uh, One company spent nearly $27 million on its farm, and electric bill for just the LEDs can run into six figures annually. If you're doing climate control, add more. Um, and the companies sold themselves as tech companies to investors, not agricultural companies. And so they create bespoke automation systems, for watering, fertilization that create cost huge amounts because you can't just get someone off the street and an engineer to easily come in and work on these systems. It's just too hard. It's custom. They also paid way too much for the executives. Spent a significant chunk. Some companies spend a significant chunk of its revenue paying $7 million in severance to two executives. Okay, that's kind of a general complaint. I won't say that's anything too specific. Important note that low tech indoor growing is already a key part of our agricultural system, but doesn't attract the same investment. Yeah, fully indoor warehouse farms are relatively new. So the broad concept, though, is not as radical. Traditional greenhouses already grow a large percentage of tomatoes eaten in the US. In the Netherlands, greenhouses grow nearly 1 million tons of tomatoes a year, making the country a major food exporter despite its tiny size. Hey, that's a pretty interesting point, isn't it? So the Netherlands is tiny, but produces a huge amount of food. Uh, Probably, kind of an inspiration to other tiny country, which is Singapore. Uh, yeah, I think that's pretty remarkable.
Hmm.
So he goes on a little bit. It's almost done now. I'll just finish up. This isn't just Schadenfreude at investors losing money. Vertical farming could be an incredibly important part of a resilient agricultural system. And some are still struggling to make the process work. Others are skipping the lettuce and moving directly to berries, which are expensive, make a lot of money, profitable, and also provide, I suppose, more calories, right? Because they're sweet. There you go. So that's it. Thank you, Morgan Clendaniel. All of these notes, as usual, for our listeners, will be in the show notes. So check it out in the description. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's like in any other industry. This story is fantastic, right? Because it's like the US invest tech scene. The tech investment scene can get very crazy, and especially kind of it follows memes. you know, the right person at the right time convinces somebody that vertical farming is the future, and suddenly you have billions of dollars going into that. Might turn out to be not so brilliant after all. But I think it's just also indicative of the newness of this industry and people getting interested. And as a result of this, the next person seeking investment would have to come up with a more robust plan. So sad that these things did not work out, but I think they, in their crazy adventure, they might have paved the way for something that is actually a bit more practical and useful at the end of the day.
Yeah, uh, I'm sure it will. There will be lessons learned.
I
But
want
we can't take it for granted that the march of progress is linear and that we will get there. Like Singapore will produce enough food and escape the risk of like a crisis, a world crisis, because there have been things that did not work out. Once upon a time, in the early 2000s, it was really important to Singapore to have a biotech industry. So I think that was before you were in Singapore. I remember, so I was in pre-university in college, junior college, and everybody was really excited because we were going to be the first generation to enter university and have the opportunity to specialize in biotech, which would be housed in this huge tract of land that was going to be developed with lots and lots of specialized facilities for biotech companies to do their R&D and such. Now I think hundreds of millions of dollars later, it didn't pan out. All the large biotech companies, they may have, I think a few of them set up some offices, and they adhered to some requirements to get the tax benefits, but no, not to my knowledge, like no major contribution to the economy was seen there. Later on, that place got turned into what you and I know as the Mediopolis. So that's now the heart of like all the media and tech startups in Singapore. Once upon a time, before it got to the size that it is now, it started off focused on biotech. So we can't be sure that it'll work out. I do have my criticisms, my critique about it. I think that the focus on vertical farming, high tech farming, um, I don't think that's how the Netherlands does it. It's not. They've been very productive agriculturally for decades, and that's way before we have our modern, like IoT systems, and so on. So clearly, that's not how they did it. How they did it is much more traditional. Okay, you have lots of greenhouses. You make maybe uh, farming a viable career. Perhaps you have good education for farmers. You make sure that they have an easy way to export it, because you can have situations in countries like Malaysia and Indonesia, I believe. We have some problems that are, maybe you have some farmers, but they can't sell their products directly to the supermarkets. So you need to sell it to a middleman. The middleman will buy all the, let's say, all the rice, and then they will mill the rice, polish the rice, package the rice, and then they will sell it to the supermarket. Or they may even resell it further, right, to somebody else who will then export them overseas or something. So there are different rungs in these value chains, and in Malaysia and Indonesia, there's some criticism, and I think it's pretty fair that these middlemen, they're always these big companies. They suck up all the profits and leave so little for the farmers. It's not, nobody wants to be a farmer anymore. Totally valid criticism. So perhaps that's less of an issue in the Netherlands. Perhaps some of that might be cultural, some of that might be a legacy, and some of it might just be good planning. I don't really know. But I think that these are things that uh, don't really get mentioned, like when we read everything that I've read, does not seem to focus on that, and I think that's to the detriment of Singapore's efforts. They probably should be talking more about, how do we produce more, and then how do we make sure that they get uh, held to good standards, make it easy to export, make it easy for the producers to sell direct, things like that.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm just want to add sort of the human perspective in there. I think transformation is never easy, right? And especially if you have been successful at something and it pays well, and for a large part of your history, it's worked out just fine to go to the neighborhood supermarket, let's say Malaysia or Indonesia, and get whatever you want. There's not enough of a reason to switch. But one thing I do appreciate about Singapore from having been there and from outside is that they still seem to think about the future and try to support, facilitate different programs. I'm sure there might be people who might have criticisms about that, but from an outsider perspective, sure, maybe the biotech thing did not work out. And they decided consciously to not continue down that path, but they attempted it. And I think it's kind of when it comes to food, food supply, food production, this 30 by 30 program feels very similar. Somebody is thinking about food security. They have a starting proposal, and let's hope that it's going to evolve. And I'm sure Singapore is going to learn from any place it can learn from. Like that's one thing that I have plenty of confidence in. Never say never, but I hope that it will. Netherlands has had a lot of time. Like this is also something to consider, right? So countries like Netherlands haven't been just around for 60 years. They've been around for much longer. They've had a lot of time to establish their practices, their economic structures around farming, and they have a lot. I do think they have a lot more land than Singapore. Singapore barely has any free land, as far as I understand. So I think Singapore is going to be essentially learning from all these places, plus bringing the innovative side, because I don't think they have the parameters to do it this the way other countries have been doing it traditionally. If you don't mind, and since we are almost at 50 minutes, I think we're going to have to continue this episode because I would have also loved to talk about monoculture. I would have loved to talk about food waste, because you can definitely use a lot of innovation uh, in terms of food production, and if you produce it locally, yes, you're also kind of improving the supply chain in certain ways. But kind of if you're wasting 20, 30, or 40% of what you're producing at different stages of this process, all the way from the farm to the plate at a restaurant or at a home, then there might be a lot of margin for improvement there as well. We've talked about in the past when we talk about climate change or some of these other things, emissions, and people talk about the correlation between population and emissions, then with a stabilizing population or a shrinking population, in a way, almost the problem would be gone. You don't necessarily need to do anything special. Theoretically, we are not scientists, so and I think there's a certain parallel when it comes to food production as well. If a country is wasting, apparently the numbers for US are around 40%. Globally, in some places it might be a lot less, in other places might be a bit more. But
Who
even if it
reported
is,
that? Where does that report come from? Where does that figure come from?
I think I had it. I can't find the tab right now, but I'll try to find that. But there's globally it's around 17, 18%. That's on UN's food loss and waste report. I'll just put the link here in chat. I don't
I
think we
think
have
we
enough
haven't
time
we
to
learned
get.
that these are unreliable.
But that's the interesting thing, right? So it's
Yeah.
kind of let's suppose UN says it's 17%, but it is actually 10%. Or maybe 7% of that is really unrecoverable and 10% is really what is recoverable. I mean, that's pretty significant. I when I think about these things, I think in terms of, if you have a new medicine that says it works for 95% of the patients, but it kills the other 5%. I mean, 5% is pretty significant, right? And so we get to be the judges of what risk and what advantages there might be. But I think food waste, and if we are able to reduce that, already kind of reduces the burden to produce more. And that's kind of the interconnected of all these things. Supply chain issues, yeah, if you're reliant on a neighboring country and due to war or due to other contingencies, the supply chain is broken, supply lines are broken, you're going to be stuck. But if you are producing a lot of your needs locally, you just have faster access. It's right there. So these things connect with each other a lot, and yeah, I just wanted to throw that in there. I don't know what you think about it and what comes to your mind when it comes to food waste and its connection with also the needs. And then monoculture is going to be a whole different thing. I would have loved to talk about soy farms, and killing the
Yeah,
rainforest for
yeah.
that.
Um, Let me start here. I just want to show you something. I just opened up Singapore on Google Earth. You can see that, you know, there's still a lot of green. Centrally, oh, this is mostly a national park, right? Nature reserve, sorry, nature reserve. Over here is where you'll find a lot of actual land that you can use. And yeah, I suppose they could do some agriculture, but as you already know, less than 1% of the land is uh, currently used for agriculture. And you can see that this is way more than 1%. It's just a decision, a choice, not to use it. My understanding is that you can get something like you can lease the land for farming, and it is common to get a 3-year lease. Now, I think if you just even just thinking about it for myself, I would think that 3 years is not really that long at all. If I wanted to farm a piece of land, I would expect to get like a decade maybe, because I feel like I will want plenty of time to get things right. And some years I cannot predict the weather, but in Singapore they just give you 3 years. So I think that really raises the barrier to entry. It makes things harder. It makes things harder. So I don't want to just. I don't think that it's sufficient or satisfactory. Just talk about how, yeah, I'm sure they'll get it right, and we can see the growth, and that's so great. No, I think that we can actually uncover specific things that are not entirely. There are weaknesses. It's not something we need to dive into some obscure report of 3,000 pages and then finally discover the problem. We can see it right here on the map. Like clearly, okay, 1% of the land is agricultural, but there's clearly a huge amount of land available for at least experimental purposes, but it's not being done, and you only get 3 years at a time. That doesn't sound very satisfactory. Also, you can obviously see that there's so much water down here, so much space. Fish farming could be greatly expanded. If it is not, I suppose partly that's only partly like a policy decision. The other part of it, I suppose, cultural. Like, who wants to do fish farming anyway? You saw the ramshackle, how ramshackle those fish farms look. Who wants to spend their working life out there? They rather work in a bank. So part of that's cultural. But if the country wants to take itself seriously and persist, to make enough food to survive a crisis, then people have to adapt their lives. If it's not attractive to be a farmer, then the risk will always be present, and that's too bad. That's a real thing. I mean, there are city states in the past that have got come and gone. Venice was a great city state. Uh, Hong Kong is not the same, that it was in the past. All the Greek city states all gone. Um, even in Southeast Asia, there's some places like there was this the precursor, or rather the founder of Singapore, is said to have come from a place called Palembang, which is also a prosperous trading seaport. City states come and go, man, and they got to deal with uh, the vicissitudes of surviving in a very cold and very dangerous world. And this food production thing probably needs to be taken really seriously, which leads kind of neatly into what you're talking about, the food waste. Uh, Personally, I tend to think that the food waste thing is too much like the other one. What was it we were looking at? Um, I can't recall what it was. Do you remember what it was?
CO2 emissions or
I think it was no garbage. It was garbage. Something about garbage, and a lot of garbage is not even how many cities in the world, in Asia, actually process their garbage, sort their garbage, right? And it turned out that there were over 1,000 cities, and the report only had data for like 60, out of which only like 2 dozen actually did any garbage processing, so they could even begin to provide actionable data. So and that I think that was also something like a UN report or World Bank report. So it was laughable, laughable, I say. And I don't take this 17% food waste. I don't know if you can take it seriously at all, because they did no mention at all of the methodology. I don't even see where I can click for it. Uh, I did look it up, right? So just to show the audience what it looks like. Here we go. International Day of Awareness on Food Loss and Waste Reduction. It's really unfortunate they chose such a photo though, because it looks awful. But yeah, so uh,
oh,
as a former student of economics, it feels to me like this is not, but just on an average, on average, this is not so much of a problem that needs to be solved. So because this is how I see it. Let's consider the case of people buying their groceries and people eating at a restaurant. Food waste in two scenarios. In the first place, if I'm buying my groceries, well, I don't want to buy too much excess, because then I'll just be throwing money away. So I'll try to buy exactly what I need, as closely as I can uh, estimate it, right? So clearly, that's something I don't want to miss by too much. And the second case, in a restaurant, uh, yes, I may be entertaining friends and I may order way too much food, and we're all half drunk, so we order way too much food, and that can happen. Uh, but I don't think that happens a great deal. Yeah,
well, I've
and
got a better one for you.
yeah,
Apparently, according to the United States Department of Agriculture,
yeah,
US has up to 40% food waste.
yeah. You
So,
mentioned that earlier.
right, so globally, according to UN, it's around 17%, but the US says the US Department of Food Agriculture,
Yes, but
Department
I
of
don't trust
Agriculture
them any
says
more than I
that.
trust the UN.
But this is interesting, right? Because I get the I think you're being too kind to the rest of us. You know, you might be someone who is pretty clear on their food needs and tries to not go above and beyond willy nilly. But I also know a lot of people whose fridges are stacked and who keep throwing out stuff because it expired a couple of weeks ago or even a year ago, and the jar is still 75% full with the jam or something else. I mean,
Right?
people do actually do this. Um, if
I
you
do
know
that too.
people, right,
Yeah.
and you're somebody who cares, I think you're giving too much credit to the, and I'll be honest, to the rest of us. We do consume a lot, and people don't necessarily clean their plates at restaurants. You know,
Yes. Everything you said is true, Balach. There's no lie there. So plenty of people, everybody listening, everybody we know probably has wasted food. The question is to what degree? 40% is a huge amount. So it's like almost half the things you put in the fridge are never eaten and thrown away. Isn't that absurd? Just on
it
the
is,
face of
it
it.
is, it is, and I completely
So I
agree
don't
with
believe
you
it.
on that, right? I think it's it feels unbelievable,
Yeah,
right?
and
And
thus I don't believe it.
what I would add, because it's interesting, because I don't even want to say I believe it, right? But I want to have something to believe. So for me, I would almost kind of, if I were to give a bit of a concession there, I would say we need better data. Because also
Agree.
interestingly, I mean,
Yeah.
this for me would be uh, the U.S. Department of Agriculture should be a trustable source, in my opinion. And if I live in a world where I can't trust the people who work in the exactly in the industry,
Right.
then I've got other problems. But what I also see here is that the data, some of that data is pointed to 2010 or so. So I'm gonna find the right place for that later. Right. So the numbers, they share the numbers. So this waste corresponds to, and according to them, this is 31% food loss at the retail and consumer levels, corresponded to approximately 133 billion pounds and 161 billion dollars worth of food in 2010. So definitely the data is kind of like, I would love to know what the data is in 2022. Hoping that the data collection mechanisms, the amount of data, the sampling rates, etc., would have improved by then. So I hope we have more data, because these numbers, if true, are alarming, and if completely untrue, are alarming in very different ways, right? Then I would be like, what the fuck, you know? The guys that I want to trust basically are losing my trust by lumping all sorts of data in a very weird and wonderful way. So yeah,
In a horrible way, perhaps.
I'm right next to you with with slightly different perspectives on that.
So how does one figure it out, right? Because we already know that um, we were told things like some kinds of injections prevent some kinds of diseases from spreading, and it turned out not to be true. And it was the most respected authorities in the world that told us that. So can we expect to trust a humble statistic that's just about food waste? It's just a small thing in the grand scheme of life. Can we believe it? I would be skeptical. I mean, we got to. I think the towards things with very sketchy or very that do not come with good like methodology or uh, descriptions. I think it's very reasonable to approach it with a skeptical attitude as the first instinct.
I agree. I think just to add a different perspective, I just shared a link with you that we can put in the show notes as well. So in Germany, there's this app Too Good to Go. I believe it also operates in some other European countries. And what these guys do is they allow participating restaurants and supermarkets to put up on the app things that are about to expire, from supermarkets and
Mm-hmm.
from restaurants meals that they were going to throw away on that day, on that
Mm-hmm.
evening, on that night. And so this is perhaps a very limited but very clear and direct measure for me where I can say, right, how many meals have these guys saved which would have definitely been thrown away, or and how much produce have they saved that people have taken and used
Mm-hmm.
that would definitely have been 100% wasted otherwise. Because restaurants do produce a lot. You know, they pre-cook or prepare huge amounts of things that are used all the time, like rice, etc., that they definitely can't use the next day, that they would definitely throw away. And these guys in this impact report, I think, shows in 2021 they saved about 52,000 meals, 52 million meals.
Wow.
Now, right, like it's hard to put it into perspective in terms of, because they don't work with every single restaurant in Germany or in Berlin. So it's hard to put it into perspective how much food waste they have saved in that
Right.
sense.
Yeah.
But there definitely is food waste, and there are some
Yeah.
people who are helping save it in different ways. So that's where I kind of stand, and it's a bit of a poor place to stand at, right? Because you wish you had more information, and but there's definitely this thing.
Yeah. And right off the bat, in the PDF that you shared with me, let's just show it to the audience as well as we talk about it. So right off the bat, uh, they where is it? Uh, More than a food app. Oh, here's something from the chairman or chairperson. All right, 40% of all food goes to waste globally. That's that's more than double the UN estimate.
Hmm.
So that's uh, how you deal with a 17% problem and a 40% problem, probably really different because it's such a huge amount, and if the discrepancy is so large, it's totally, garbage. You throw it away. There's just no uh no way to trust it. And then from a there's one. I want to think that, I'd be happy to believe that they're doing good work. But there's another thing that I take issue with, which is that, well, if they want to persuade me, with their impact report, they ought to be paying the bill for an independent auditor to figure out what their impact is. Because if I'm trying to persuade you that I've done a good job, and all you hear is my side of the story, then obviously, you're getting a very biased view, right? Uh, so you should, if I wanted to prove to you, something, it's best for you to speak to a couple of different people, maybe someone I worked with on a project before. Let's say you want to promote, considering whether to promote me, you talk to somebody I worked with before, talk to my subordinates, talk to my I don't know, other team members, and then you stand a chance to get a more accurate view of the situation. Not only just reading my report that puts me in the best possible light. So there's two things immediately off the bat is just a little more sketchy. It looks great, but we can't really trust it. Just organizational, the nature of organizations, it can't be helped unless it's a third party audit. Yeah, I'd be more interested in, I think, uh, if they could, let's see, food quality actually. Like one thing that I'm more really interested in nowadays is the food quality. I think there's so many facets to this, the topic of food production, food quality, food waste, food cost, sustainability, availability, nutritional, completeness for everyone, and how it causes problems like, metabolic disease, obesity, and so on. Quality, I think, is a really surprising thing because if you go back not 100 years, out of the, like, I don't know, maybe 200,000 years of anatomically modern humans, it's only in the past 100 years that the most underprivileged in society are overweight and obese, while the most privileged are actually, slim and, good looking and fit, which is a total inversion of history. And it's just a validation of sorts of the idea that, we are in a we are in or entering a post scarcity world. Yeah, a post scarcity world where food is abundant. Just have to worry about whether you're eating the right thing, whether you're eating the right amount. And we're getting to that point, or we are in that point. Like, I guess around the world it's slightly different, but I think that that is if I were, somebody with in this kind of activism space, I think that would be much more um, useful place to put my energy. Like, already everybody's relatively well fed, and then the cleaning up, and the restaurants don't want to waste. Individuals don't want to waste. It's an unfortunate consequence. But what they're not able to do, and which there is not enough guidance, because I believe that uh, food industry is captured, like, sorry, or rather, health and nutrition, the worlds of health and nutrition are captured by fruit production. So we don't really get very good information about it. For instance, you've probably heard people say that alcohol consumption in moderation is good for you. It turns out that is utter nonsense. It is just, so the studies that show this, would do very very inadequate things. Like, I may give a questionnaire that asks, how much alcohol do you consume a day, and then I'll take your medical records, uh, and I'll use that to compare against people with, self-reported different levels of alcohol consumption. And guess what? Most people will, consume a little bit of alcohol, and if you are not consuming any alcohol at all, you may not be able to afford it, or you have, like, very specific, like, religious reasons or dietary reasons. If it's dietary reasons, maybe you have some existing health issues. And then people who totally drink way too much, right? They're totally, like, out of the equation, out of the picture, because their health is obviously terrible, right? So what you end up with is the people who drink a little bit. The ones who don't drink at all are very few, and the ones who drink way too much, they're also kind of out of the picture because their health is so bad. So we kind of end up with this self-reported group that drinks a little bit, has pretty good health, and we'll come to this wrong conclusion that, oh, drinking a little bit is good for you. But the robust way to do it would be you get two control groups. You say, okay, one totally doesn't drink at all. The other one, you can drink, and this is the limit, and this is what you're going to do. Like, you can drink one drink, two drink, three drink a week, and you will stick to it over a period of time. And then we'll see how your health outcomes are after a few years. And of course, that's never been done. Uh, and it turns out that, there was this. So that's one part. The second thing was, that you're told that you can get these antioxidants from red wine, for instance. So it turns out that the antioxidants you get, there's a name for it, resveratrol. Resveratrol is present and it's good for you, but the amount that you get from a glass of red wine is so minuscule that you have to be drinking liters of it in order to get an amount that actually can manifest an effect in your body. So it's just absurd.
No,
And
I
it's easy.
completely agree.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, better studies and better data definitely will help. And I would just augment what you were saying. Oftentimes we take correlation as causation, and that is where a lot of problems come in, as well as you might have the research, but only the flashy part of it gets reported, and then everybody jumps on that, right? So you might have the USDA saying they estimate 40%, but they don't write that the margin of error might be plus minus 5% or 10%, right? And then you have a company, Too Good to Go, doing good work. I mean, they did save 52 million meals. Maybe it's just a drop in the bucket or half the bucket. That's what we can't know because they jump on that 40% figure, and in their report, they end up writing that's the global average. So, kind of definitely not having enough data can completely skew perceptions where you might think is something might not be even worth the effort, or it might be saving the world, and you can't really say that. All you can say is you did something good, and thank you for that. With correlation causation with diet and nutrition, I think definitely we can continue the same topic next week, and go further into it because I'm a vegetarian, as you know. I stopped drinking alcohol a couple of years ago, but I've had enough of it. I've had my fill. So we can definitely talk about that as well. Because I've had to think about these questions, right? And I think about being a vegetarian. I think about the First Nations in Canada or other communities that are entirely living off of meat and fish.
Mm.
Or I think about, when I think about going vegan, then I think about the Italians in Sardinia who are living off pasta and pizza and wine and living into their 90s and hundreds and constitute one of the few blue zones in the world where people have the highest longevity and generally good health without any of the new world biohacking systems. These guys are eating flour and tomatoes and cheeses and they live longer and they seem to be happy. And so you might think, oh well, then the Italian cuisine and red wine and coffee is the way to live long and well. But we often miss the fact that, and it's been people are starting to show it and share it more and more that it's not just the food, it's also the social structure they have over there. That actually your social connections have a huge impact on your health outcomes and longevity outcomes than almost the food you eat, right? So there's a lot of nuances and kind of the science process is a double-edged sword, right? So with every experiment or every better experiment, you get better information, but you might also discover more avenues that you have to discover further and explore further before you can kind of lay something to rest. Um,
You
so
you
yeah,
must be getting
definitely.
you must be getting too comfortable because you're throwing us into dangerous territory.
Well, the way I think, so I'm, to be honest, disclaimer, right? So I'm
Yeah,
not an
yeah.
expert and I'm not defending anybody. I want to, since we are learning in public and discussing
Yes,
this,
that's
I'm
true.
just sharing how I think about it and how I satisfy my mind because, like I said, the alternative would be I'd be in an alarm state all the time.
That's true.
So the way that's how I see it in terms of with each step, hopefully we get better. And I see the value in some of the work that has been done, but
Yeah.
definitely kind of take it with a grain of salt. And some of the best
Yes.
experts do that, right? If you listen to Andrew Huberman on his podcast,
Yeah.
half the experts, half the time, are always adding caveats and disclaimers to their explanations and mentioning
Yes,
this is what
absolutely.
we don't know. However, this is what we do know. And there are
Absolutely.
also people who might disagree with this. And that's, I wish there was 100% certainty on these things. But while there is not, we try to make sense of it from our personal opinions, right? And I'll also be honest, sometimes I might have a personal opinion that goes against anything, but everything and everyone. But I'm gonna be honest. That's my promise for this show. That I'll be honest, and I will always tell you this is my personal opinion, and you don't have to take my word for it.
Yes, that goes without saying. Yes. Thank you, Balach. Totally agree. Hey, in fact, perhaps I why don't we could do this? Let's finalize this, after our session. But just to tease something to our audience, maybe you could make the case, like, according to what you said about the First Nations in Canada who eat meat and fish. Like, you could, have you heard of the steel man,
No,
straw
I
man?
have
You
not.
heard of?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the
Right.
opposite of straw man, right? The opposite
Mm-hmm.
straw man is to build a misrepresentation and then to knock down that misrepresentation. The steel man is the most charitable way to have a discussion with people. That is to say, I'm going to take your argument, I'm going to construct the strongest possible version of it, and then I'll engage with it and interact with you on that basis. So it may not be my argument, it may not be my belief, but it
Mm-hmm.
is what I do with the argument from you that I receive. So that's a steel man. I steel
Mm-hmm.
man the argument. So uh, why don't how about we do this for fun? You're the vegetarian, right? Sorry, did I
Mm-hmm.
misrepresent?
Yeah.
Right. So wouldn't it be fun if you steel man the First Nations, in Canada, their diet, what are the benefits, and you try to construct the strongest possible argument for that way of eating, and then the average Joe who eats whatever nonsense crap that comes my way, I steel man. Wait, you need to tell me the specifics about your diet, but then I steel man that, and then we have this argument, so to speak, like
Mm-hmm.
philosophic or structured debate next week.
We can give it a try.
Does that sound
So
fun?
I'm gonna do my research on um, non-vegetarian diets and try to steelman that. Why not?
All right. Yeah, this is gonna be a fun one. I can tell. I mean, for me at least, you can see that I feel look like I'm gonna have a lot of fun with this. Uh, I think it's a great intellectual exercise. It is the way to improve, in our thoughts, in our understanding of the world, is to have the intellectual flexibility to adopt a position that is not our own. Like, if we do that and we it becomes part of us, it allows us to have the possibility to change our mind because we know what that feels like. And I like to make sure I get some practice on that from time to time. And if you'd like to do it together with me, that would be even better. Yeah.
Awesome. Then we have a deal.
All right.
Then
For
I'll
sure,
hit the
Jake.
button for our live audience. Thank you for being with us. And for anyone
Thank you,
watching
everyone.
later, see you soon again.
Thank you, Balach.